You keep thinking you're the problem. You walk into a room and feel like your presence takes up too much space. You offer help, but secretly wonder if you're a burden. You cry in silence and clean up your own tears before anyone can see. Because somewhere along the way, you believed this: I am too much to carry. I make things heavier just by being here. But that's not the truth. That's the story fear told you after you started carrying weights that were never yours to hold. You didn't mean to. You were trying to help, trying to be strong for everyone, trying to be the one who kept it all together when everything else was falling apart. And the world, maybe even your church, praised you for it. They called you dependable. They said you were so spiritually mature. They admired your endurance. But deep down, you weren't strong. You were numb. You weren't calm. You were disconnected. And the weight on your back? It wasn't your cross. It was everyone else's silence, pain, expectations, and unmet need dumped on you because you were the one who could handle it. But just because you could carry it doesn't mean you were meant to. You picked up their emotional wounds. You internalized their disappointment. You blamed yourself for their distance. You took responsibility for holding peace in places where no one else even tried. You became the emotional center of rooms that drained you. And when you finally needed help, no one noticed, because you had trained them so well to believe you're always okay. That's how invisible weight. It convinces you that your exhaustion is your own fault. It teaches you to apologize for needing rest. It makes you feel guilty for saying, I'm tired, even when your soul is screaming. And when the guilt becomes too loud to ignore, you don't ask for help. You double down. You work harder. You serve more. You perform your stability so convincingly that even you forget what it feels like to be soft. But God never asked you to live like that. He never asked you to be the one who fixes everything. He never expected you to hold emotions that aren't yours. He never told you that your value comes from how useful, quiet, or selfless you are. That's not spiritual strength. That's emotional overfunctioning with a Bible verse taped over it. You've been operating from a belief system that says love equals sacrifice, even when it destroys you, that your worth is measured by how much you can endure, that letting go is selfish and needing help is weakness. But you're not. You're just exhausted from carrying everyone else's storms and still pretending to be sunshine. You didn't become this way by accident. Maybe you grew up in a house you had to keep the peace. Maybe you were the emotional glue that held broken people together. Maybe you learned that being needed was the only way to be loved. So you became the responsible one, the strong one, the safe one. But nobody ever stopped to ask if you felt safe, if you were okay, if your heart was breaking under the pressure of being the one no one checked on. And now you wake up with heaviness, not just physical tiredness, but that soul-weighted fatigue, the kind of tired that doesn't sleep away, the kind that says, I don't know how much longer I can carry this. So let me say this to the part of you that's never heard it before. You are not a burden. You've just been carrying burdens that were never yours. That anxiety you feel when you disappoint someone, it was taught to you. That guilt you carry for resting, it was modeled to you. That belief that love must always come with pain, it was handed to you by people who didn't know how to love freely. And God, He's not asking you to keep carrying it. He's not impressed by your burnout. He's not honored by your emotional martyrdom. He's not proud that you suffer quietly to be the good one. What moves the heart of God is truth. And the truth is, your soul wasn't designed for this much weight. You were never meant to carry everyone else's healing. You were never meant to absorb unspoken blame. You were never asked by heaven to destroy your inner peace to keep outer appearances intact. You're allowed to set it down, not because you're giving up, but because you're finally telling the truth. I can't carry this anymore, and I was never supposed to. And that moment, that sacred laying down, that's not weakness, that's worship. It's a declaration that says, God, I'm done trying to be you. I'm ready to just be me. The version of you that doesn't always have the answers. The version that cries, that forgets, that rests, that receives love without needing to earn it. The version that says, I'm allowed to need something too. You've spent so much time managing everyone else's needs that you forgot what your own even sound like. So now, gently, without pressure or performance, it's time to listen. Not to the guilt, not to the voice of religious shame, but to the soft whisper that's been waiting underneath the noise. You are allowed to let go. And the first weight you may need to release isn't a task or a role. It's the belief that being tired makes you unworthy, that rest means failure, that your existence is only valuable when it's useful. Because that belief, that's the real burden, and it's time to return it to where it came from. Because you were never made to be the solution. You were made to be held. There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. You go to bed tired and wake up heavy. Not because your body hasn't rested, but because your soul never got the chance. Because long after your head hits the pillow, your mind is still spinning. What did I forget? Who did I let down? Did I do enough? Was I too much? This isn't just busyness, it's burdened identity. It's the kind of exhaustion that comes from living your life in response to everyone else's unspoken needs. The kind that teaches you that being good means being last, that loving others means abandoning yourself. That responsibility equals holiness, even if it crushes you. You didn't choose this consciously. You were conditioned into it. Maybe your childhood home was full of silence, and you filled it with peace. Maybe someone you loved was unpredictable, and you learned to manage their mood. Maybe you were praised only when you performed, so you began to believe that being needed equals being loved. So you became the one who shows up, the one who knows what to say, the one who can hold space for everybody, even when your own heart is unraveling. And when you brought that pattern into your faith, it found the perfect place to hide. Because religion often celebrates the sacrificial, the unseen, the ones who lay down their lives in quiet suffering. So your self-neglect was applauded. Your overfunctioning was spiritualized. Your emotional suppression was mistaken for peace. And no one stopped to ask, who told you that love means disappearing? Because slowly, that's what started to happen. You disappeared. Your voice softened. Your needs got smaller. Your opinions stayed quiet. Not because you didn't have anything to say, but because somewhere deep inside, you believed that you were safest when you weren't a problem. And now, you're tired of carrying it. You're tired of being the one who never breaks. Tired of smiling through the ache. Tired of praying for others while secretly wondering if anyone's praying for you. Tired of feeling guilty every time you want to be seen instead of being needed. But the moment you think about stepping back, the fear kicks in. What if they stop needing me? What if I become invisible? What if the love goes away when I stop carrying their weight? That's how deep this pattern runs. It's not just about tasks, it's about identity. Because when you've lived for so long as the emotional caretaker, your worth starts to fuse with your ability to hold everything together. But here's the hard truth. That identity is not sustainable, and it's not sacred. It's survival, and survival is necessary for a season. But it's not the same thing as healing. It's not the same thing as joy. It's not the same thing as peace. Survival taught you to hold everything in. Healing teaches you to let God hold you. And that shift doesn't start with doing less. It starts with believing something radically different, that your value is not connected to what you carry. Your worth is not proven by how much you endure. You are not a better Christian because you burn out quietly. Let that settle. You are not more faithful because you say yes to everything. You are not more anointed because you never ask for help. You are not more spiritual because you've learned how to disappear while smiling. God does not love the version of you who's most useful. He loves the version of you who is. And if your definition of love keeps you in a cycle of silence, self-blame, and exhaustion, then what you're carrying isn't love. It's fear in religious clothing. So how do you begin to unlearn it? You start with noticing. Notice when your body tenses every time someone needs something. Notice when your chest tightens at the thought of disappointing someone. Notice when you're more comfortable offering comfort than receiving it. Then ask yourself, whose weight am I carrying right now? Because some of what's crushing you isn't yours. It's the grief your parents never processed, the guilt your church placed on your shoulder, the shame someone projected onto you, the pressure of roles you were never meant to play. And once you name it, you can start to return it. not with bitterness, not with rebellion, but with holy release. You can say, "This was never mine to carry. I picked it up to feel safe. I carried it because I thought it would make me loved, but I can't keep living like this because it's slowly killing the parts of me that God made to live." And here's what you'll begin to notice as you lay it down. Your voice comes back. Your laughter feels real. Your sleep becomes deeper. Your no starts to feel like worship. Your prayers shift from "use me" to "know me." Because now, you're not trying to prove anything. You're learning how to simply be. And when someone asks you for more than you have, you don't apologize for your limits. You honor them. When guilt knocks, you don't open the door. You remember that Jesus never said, "Come to me, all who are perfect." He said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Not more to do, not more to fix, just rest. Maybe for the first time in your life, you're ready to believe Him. And as you do, you'll begin to see your strength differently, not as your ability to hold everyone else up, but as your willingness to be held yourself. There are wounds you carry that don't look like wounds. They look like verses. They sound like humility. They echo in your prayers when you whisper, "God, I know I don't deserve anything," but it's subtle, it's quiet, and it's everywhere. That quiet theology that taught you holiness equals hiding. That God is near when you're serving, but not when you're struggling. That if your life is heavy, maybe it's because you haven't surrendered enough. So you try harder, you dig deeper, you shrink smaller. Not because you love God, though you do, but because somewhere along the way, you learned to associate pain with purity. That suffering in silence is sacred. That saying no is selfish. That boundaries are a sign of rebellion. That rest is only for those who've earned it. And slowly, without realizing it, your faith becomes a filter for guilt. A place where every emotional need feels like weakness. Where self-care feels like sin. Where any attempt to receive love feels like pride. Because if you're not emptying yourself constantly, how can you call it Christ-like? You see the cross and forget the resurrection. You embrace the sacrifice but reject the restoration. You give without receiving, pour without being filled. And when you start to break, you call it persecution instead of what it really is. Self-abandonment in the name of spiritual devotion. But the truth is, Jesus never asked you to carry a religion that crushes your spirit. He didn't say, "Come to me, all who have it together." He didn't say, "Come to me, all who never need boundaries, who never ask for help, who never feel tired." He said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened." So why do you still feel like being weary makes you unworthy? Why do you believe that the more invisible you are, the more God is pleased? That guilt didn't come from God. It came from a misinterpretation of love. Because love isn't silent suffering. Love isn't disappearing until someone asks what's wrong. Love isn't giving until you're bitter and calling it grace. Love tells the truth. And here's the truth. God never designed you to prove your value through pain. He never asked you to collapse in His name. But religion, when misunderstood, can distort His voice. It teaches us to spiritualize self-neglect, to mask emotional exhaustion with obedience, to confuse dysfunction with devotion. You serve, and when someone says, "You're amazing, you're always here," something inside you lights up, not because you're proud, but because it's the only time you feel seen. And when that recognition fades, you start to wonder, am I still valuable if I stop showing up? Am I still holy if I stop saying yes? That's how spiritual guilt becomes a cycle, a loop where your worth is wrapped around your usefulness, and God becomes someone you try to impress, instead of someone who's already at home in your soul. You see, real love doesn't need performance. It doesn't require you to pretend. It doesn't demand you to disappear just to keep the peace. It welcomes the honest version of you, the tired version, the confused version, the healing version, the human version. And maybe that's where the weight starts to loosen, when you stop trying to impress God with your discipline and start meeting Him in your vulnerability. Because here's what no one tells you in church. You can love Jesus and still need therapy. You can serve faithfully and still need rest. You can believe in grace and still wrestle with shame. You can be anointed and still cry in your car, wondering if you'll ever feel like enough. And none of that makes you less spiritual. It just makes you real. And real is where Jesus does his best work. Not in the polished, not in the perfect, but in the places that are still trembling, still unsure, still trying to believe they're allowed to be soft. So when you hear that voice in your head, the one that says, "You should be stronger by now. You should be past this. You're too much, too emotional, too needy," pause and ask yourself, whose voice is that, really? Because God's voice doesn't accuse, it doesn't rush, it doesn't shame. God's voice comforts. It slows you down. It sits with you when you can't move. It reminds you that you're loved even when you bring nothing but your breath. And maybe that's what healing is. Not becoming someone better, but remembering you were never a burden to begin with. You just picked up that belief somewhere along the way, from people who were too broken to carry their own pain, so they gave it to you. From systems that glorified sacrifice but forgot compassion. From voices that taught you God only loves what's holy, and never taught you that holiness can look like receiving love with open, trembling hand. That's what changes. Not guilt, not shame, not pressure, but love. The kind that says, you don't have to prove anything anymore. You can set it down. I'm not leaving. And when you hear that voice, you start to see yourself differently. Not as the overgiver, not as the fixer, not as the strong one who never breaks, but as someone who is worthy, even when empty. There's a quiet moment in every healing journey that doesn't look like much from the outside. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. There's no breakthrough on a stage or miracle at the altar. It's just this one sacred breath where you finally whisper to yourself, I can't carry this anymore. Not because you're quitting, but because something inside you finally believed you were never supposed to. It's a moment of truth, not collapse. A moment of awakening, not weakness. But getting to that moment takes time, because the weight you've been carrying wasn't just placed there by circumstance. It was internalized, bonded to your identity, woven into the way you see God, yourself, and the world. You can't just drop it like a suitcase. You have to unlearn the belief that picking it up in the first place made you holy. That's the lie that wraps itself in Scripture and stays too long in your soul. If I carry this for everyone, maybe I'll finally be enough. But that's not how healing works. Healing doesn't come when you prove you're worthy. It comes when you stop trying to be worthy and let God be the one who carries you. The hard part is, we've spent so long trying to earn what was always meant to be received. Love, peace, belonging. We thought the more we gave, the more we'd be allowed to stay. That if we could just be useful enough, strong enough, good enough, then maybe someone would finally see us, choose us, care for us in return. But when you carry other people's emotional burdens for long enough, you stop feeling the difference between support and servitude. You become the helper, the listener, the strong one, and eventually, no one even thinks to ask what you need. So when God comes near and asks you to set it down, it doesn't feel like freedom, it feels like loss. Because who are you if you're not the one holding it all together? That's the question that haunts people like you. Not, am I loved? But, will I still be loved if I'm not holding the world on my back? It's the fear that if you let go of their expectations, they'll let go of you. So you carry the invisible. You manage the unspoken. You bend and stretch and shrink to fit inside the roles that made others feel safe. And all the while your heart whispers, does anyone see that I'm breaking? God does. He saw it the first time you stayed silent when you should have said no. He saw it when you smiled while your soul was unraveling. He saw it when you thought giving more would finally heal the part of you that felt invisible. But he never asked for that sacrifice. He never said, become less so others can feel more. He said, come to me, I will give you rest. Real rest, not distraction. Not isolation, not the kind of sleep that leaves you more tired when you wake up, but the rest that comes from releasing what isn't yours. And that release is messy. It doesn't come in one prayer. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process of returning again and again to that inner space where you can finally say, God, I release the weight of proving. I release the need to be perfect. I release the burden of fixing what I didn't break. I release the lie that being useful is the same as being loved. and you'll likely feel resistant, not from God, He's always ready to receive it, but from your own history. The version of you that survived through performance doesn't trust safety yet. It needs time to believe that love won't be taken away when you stop striving. It needs to learn that saying, "I need help," doesn't cancel your strength. It confirms it. This is why surrender isn't passive. It's active. It takes incredible strength to stop clinging to your survival pattern. It takes maturity to say, "I can't do this alone anymore, and I never had to." But what if that's the moment when God begins to do the real lifting? Not in place of you, but with you. What if setting it down isn't about failure? It's about partnership. A daily rhythm where God says, "Let me carry what's crushing you. Let me sort through what was never yours to hold. Let me walk with you into a life where peace isn't something you earn. It's something you live from." You may have heard that surrender means stopping, but real surrender is movement. It's choosing differently. It's resting without apology. It's saying no with clarity and kindness. It's breathing deeply instead of bracing yourself for impact. It's deleting the message you were only sending out of guilt. It's leaving the room that drains your light. It's canceling the plans that keep you performing. And in those moments, something unexpected happens. You don't disappear. You become more fully yourself. The version of you that was buried under responsibility. The version that was silenced by guilt. The version that God has been gently inviting into the light. Because His love is not waiting for you to be ready. It's already wrapped around you, even in your unraveling. And when you finally begin to feel it, not just understand it, but feel it, everything starts to shift. You speak slower, you stand taller, you breathe deeper. Not because life is suddenly easier, but because the weight is no longer yours to carry alone. There's still more to unfold, like how to rebuild a life that doesn't revolve around guilt, urgency, or usefulness. But now that you've started releasing the weight, you're ready to create something lighter. When the weight finally begins to lift, you might expect relief to rush in. But often, what comes first is uncertainty. You've spent so long carrying everyone else's expectations, roles, and emotional responsibilities that your life without them feels unfamiliar. Not empty, exactly, just quiet. And sometimes that quiet feels like fear. Because once you stop living to meet the needs of everyone else, you're left with a question that most people avoid their entire life. Who am I when I'm not being you? It's a strange thing to discover that the freedom you prayed for can feel lonely at first. Not because you're unloved, but because you're not performing for it anymore. And that absence of performance exposes all the parts of you that were only alive because they were applauded. But this is where your new life begins. Not with a grand declaration, not with a perfect plan, but with a small, brave choice to live differently than you were taught, to believe that love doesn't require suffering, to finally ask, "What do I need?" without feeling selfish. And this question, it's sacred, because when your entire identity has been built on meeting the needs of others, learning to identify your own can feel foreign, like speaking a language you forgot you knew. So start simple. Start with what brings your breath back. Is it solitude? Music? Gentle conversation? A walk without your phone? Start with noticing the yes and the no in your body, the tension that rises in your chest when you say yes out of guilt, the soft exhale when you choose rest, and no one questions it. These are your new guide, not fear, not guilt, not spiritual pressure, but honest presence. And the more you follow that presence, the more your life begins to take shape again. On your terms, not fears. You start giving from overflow, not emptiness. You start praying from honesty, not obligation. You start showing up not because you're needed, but because you're whole enough to want to, and people notice. Not because you're louder, but because you're more you. There's a steadiness in you now, a kindness toward yourself that wasn't there before. You still care deeply, but not compulsive. You still love well, but without disappearing. And as you rebuild, some relationships will shift. Some people may not know how to relate to this new version of you. The one who has boundaries, the one who says no, the one who no longer apologizes for needing space. Let them adjust or walk away. Not because you're bitter, but because you're no longer willing to shrink to fit old versions of yourself. That's not rebellion, that's reverence. And as your relationships evolve, so will your inner life. You'll start talking to God differently. Not as a God you're trying to impress, but as a God you finally trust to love you without condition. You'll pray not just with requests, but with honesty. God, I don't have the strength today. God, I feel lost in this new life. God, thank you for the peace I'm starting to feel without needing to earn it. This kind of prayer doesn't sound powerful on the outside, but it's the kind of prayer that reshapes your entire soul. Because real spiritual strength isn't found in your ability to hold everything together. It's found in your willingness to be held. And now that you're no longer crushed by the weight of performance, you can finally receive what God has been offering all along. Not just purpose, not just mission, but rest. The kind that doesn't feel lazy or undeserved. The kind that says, I'm still valuable, even when I do nothing but breathe. And once that truth lands in your bones, you start living with a new kind of clarity. You know when to say yes, because your yes comes from alignment, not approval. You know when to step back, because you trust that absent doesn't mean abandon. You know who you are, because your identity is no longer built on how useful you are to others, but how deeply known you are by God. This is the fruit of surrender, not a smaller life, but a fuller one. A life where you are soft without being shattered, open without being overexposed, loving without losing yourself. And the beautiful thing is, you never stop healing here. You keep discovering new layers of freedom, new moments where you feel the old guilt try to return, but now you have language for it. You can say, that's not mine. I used to carry that, but I don't anymore. And in that moment, you realize you're not the same. You're not performing. You're not apologizing for taking up space. You're not waiting for someone to tell you that you're allowed to rest. You already know you are, because you are not a burden. You never were. You were just carrying things no one else was brave enough to name. And now you've named them. You've set them down. You've walked away lighter. And what's left is not weakness. It's you, fully, freely, finally.